silent, but I just assumed the person, the Colin Steinsaltz person translated that right.
Well, so the
That's right.
Amidah is something we'll get to probably next week, again, because
Right.
for the Shachari, but the term is often used, the silent Amidah, but it's not actually silent, right? Like we talked about last week, it is done at a volume level loud enough for you to hear, but not so loud that other people are being disturbed by it. And we use that term silent in English within the Jewish world to mean almost silent, but not really silent.
Yeah.
It's one of those, great examples of how English plays the same games as Hebrew does, meaning that sometimes English will use a term in a way that if you translated it literally would give you a different meaning than what it actually means technically within the Jewish world. So yeah, so silent when it comes to the Amidah is colloquially known, like all the movements call it the silent Amidah. I've always resented that because I know people misunderstand it. And they treat it as though it's meant to be only in your mind. But that's not what the text in the halachic discussion is talking about. It has to be vocalized to a very small degree. And they were more worried about people showing off and being loud and drowning out each other and disturbing each other while involved in prayer, because prayer was essentially a personal activity. But in English, and I've never gone back into the research, for some reason, the term silent got used as being the default translation for that concept. And it's confused people ever since.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering why they had a different section that talked about, it seemed like it was a different rule, like you should not disturb people with the Amidah.
Exactly, which is
it seemed like a different rule instead of being connected to the same rule, because it comes a few paragraphs later in the Talmud.
It's continued ongoing discussion. It's, that whole section is about tefillah etiquette. And the different opinions share, and they go back and forth, they clarify, and so. But yeah, that is the general opinion. But we are at 7 o'clock and we've got miles to go. I'm hoping we might get up to the edge of the Amidah today. But we will see, because we've got some big chunks, some that are done out loud, some not so out loud. Let's see how far we can go. We're picking up right where we left off. We're on page 151. We are in the midst of Yotzer Or. But Eladon, this composition on page 51 is so distinct that it deserves its own discussion. Normally, I only put a little discussion slide up when we're beginning a whole new prayer. This is still Yotzer Or. It feels different because we sing it differently than the rest of Yotzer Or, but we did the opening blessing and we haven't done the closing blessing, so we are still in the Yotzer Or blessing. It was a very, very long blessing for Shabbat morning, partly because of this piyut, this liturgical poem, partly because of the paragraph that comes right after, which is essentially an extension of this theme, which focuses on Shabbat, as well as the idea of Yotzer Or, of creation and light. And so this becomes a very, very long blessing. So let's talk about Eladon. Eladon is a overtly mystical poem. That is to say, it is telling you, look at the world and then stop looking at the world. That the world looks like something, but there is an element behind it, behind the veil, behind the curtain, that is different than the physicality of creation. And it's going to focus on the orot, the lights that we see all around us in the sky. So we have the sun, we have the moon, we have the stars. All of these are considered to be representative of the heavenly creatures, not just because they're up there, but because when we look at them, we are reminded of the complexity of the creation that God has made. We are reminded of the forces all around us, some of which some of our ancestors might have considered to be more literal than others. Other of our ancestors considered them to be the literal forces that bound the universe together, but wings and halos you can leave behind. But that is essentially what Eladon is about, reflecting upon the nature of the world and recognizing that there is a spirit behind it that is moving it in this beautiful harmony. It is not just dead matter that is floating around in the universe. And while many modern Jews, myself included, are perfectly at home with the modern cosmology of Big Bang and the great age of the universe, the great age of the earth, that doesn't mean that we look at the world as being lifeless. We look at it as still being representative of the spirit of the creator, and all of its complexity and all of its beauty. So El Adon still works perfectly fine, regardless of where you stand on that divide of young earth, old earth.
What?
It's an old earth, by the way. We can have that conversation another time.
El Adon translated, Lord, sir? Oh, I don't know.
God, Lord, right? El Adon, right? God who is Lord, God the Lord. I mean, Adon can mean also like master in the sense of the one in charge of something.
Yeah, so they flipped in the translation, huh?
Well, no, El, no. I tried to put it roughly in order. Again, as always, the translations are here to help you understand the Hebrew so that when you sing it or participate in it, you have some understanding of it. You'll notice that I give more time and energy to translating things that are done out loud than to things that are done privately. And that's because of what we discussed last week, which is if it's being done privately, there's no reason for you to fight your way through Hebrew you don't understand. Work on the Hebrew or the English, which will still require much of you spiritually and intellectually to understand. And there's no benefit to just breaking your teeth during prayer. Outside of prayer, if you want to practice your Hebrew, you want to work on the translation, you want to unpack it, absolutely. But during prayer, you don't take out the playbook. I always tell people, it's like, if you're in the middle of the Super Bowl, you don't start doing drills with your team. Now is the time to play the game. And when you're in the middle of prayer, now is the time to engage with the prayer and the words you understand. We talked about last week, I get that there's a benefit to singing words you don't understand if it's jointly with other people. There is a feeling of community. There is a feeling of connection to time and space of the Jews all around the world, all around through time. Absolutely no problem there. Still work on the translation, which is why we're translating this more carefully. But when we're not singing it together, use the language you're most comfortable with. Did you have a question or yeah?
You really enjoyed this song, and I realize it's prayer.
Yes.
However, for me, it is almost a cadence of work,
and
it's just visually individuals in the farm pulling a rope, and it's like all together now.
Right, and the idea that this has a rhythmic work cadence. First of all, that is part of how the poetry fits together. It lends itself to that. Much of Hebrew poetry lends itself to that kind of meter that gets that feeling that you're talking about. But two, that's not wrong, because Yotzer Or is talking about creation. It's talking about the world around us. And even while, excuse me, talking all day, even while you are peeling back the physicality to see the spirituality, we still are meant to marvel at the physicality. And so feeling the cycle of the world around us and humans' interaction with it and how that needs to be done in harmony. You need the sun to tell you when to work. You need the moon to tell you what month it is. You need the stars to tell you where you are in the year for when to plant, when to harvest. All of that fits perfectly with the theme of the poem. So whether you knew it or not, you're right on target. Okay, so let's do our translation, and then we'll do one of the melodies. There are a couple of common melodies for El Adon. We'll do one that I think is probably the most accessible, but there are plenty of alternatives. But translation first, because like I said, we'll probably be singing this, and that means you want to be on target. El Adon al kol ha'ma'asim. God, Lord over all of creation. Now here ma'asim is being used in a jargony sense. It doesn't literally mean creation, it means doings, or makings. But in traditional Jewish scholarship, we call Ma'aseh Bereshit, we call it the acts of creation. And so really Ma'asim is a shorthand here for creation itself, especially within Yotzer Or, where we are talking about the creation of the world and on all of that. Baruch umvorach b'fi kol neshama. You are blessed, or rather this God is blessed and blessed. That we're kind of playing off both meanings of the term there, in the mouth of all that has a soul, that is alive.
How come you have the mem on the second word flat?
Well, because that's blessed, right? So Baruch means something that is blessed. Hamivorach is something that is blessed, right? It's like receiving the proclamation of praise, of bless.
So it's like the passive.
it's almost like the passive, or like you're the recipient of this. Exactly. You are the object rather than the subject. Whereas the first Baruch is more of just the regular adjective of like, it's a blessed day, right? It's just a good day. This is like, no, this is the thing we aim our blessings at, which is God. And that happens in the mouth of every creature. God lo, oftentimes people will mispronounce that this is one of those cases where the is pronounced like an O. V'tuvo malei olam, his greatness and his goodness fill the world. Da'at utvuna sovevim oto, knowledge and understanding surround him. Okay, now we're making our transition into the mystical theme of this poem. Right? When we say knowledge and understanding surround him, we should be starting to think of orbits. We should be thinking of, in the antiquity, the spheres of heaven, in the modern world of the orbits of the planets and of the spiraling of galaxies and all of that all of that reflects God's wisdom and understanding, because it works. and it's kind of amazing that the whole universe works. And that is what was the intent from this original poem, and can still be our intent. If anything, we understand even better how amazing the world is than they did. Okay. Hamit Ga'e al Chayot HaKodesh. Now we're getting into full mysticism. He is the one that rides upon the holy creatures. Chayot HaKodesh is one of the other terms for malachim, for angels. There is a hierarchy of angelic superiority. We're not going down that road today. We're going to talk about a few of them as we go through this poem, but it's not going to be our focus. But the concept here is that God's throne is held aloft by the angels. This is a very common metaphor in the ancient world. We saw this in the writings of Isaiah. We see this in the writings of Ezekiel most clearly and powerfully. And that's what the poet is channeling here. V'nedar b'chavod al merkava, and in glorious beauty upon the chariot. All right, here is our second mystical concept, Merkava, the chariot. Again, this is going back to the concept of Ezekiel's vision in particular, with this idea of God being surrounded by the angelic hosts. Now, that gives us our two classical pre-Zohar, pre-Kabbalah mystical concepts, which is Bereshit, Ma'aseh HaBereshit, our Ma'asim, and our Merkava, the chariot mysticism. These are the oldest threads of mysticism, which eventually got much overshadowed by the introduction of Kabbalah through the Zohar and other books like it. But this is hearkening back to a much more ancient form of mysticism, of contemplating the intricacies of the universe's working. Zechut umishor lifnei chiso, merit and uprightness are before his throne. Hesed v'rachamim lifnei chevodo, and love and mercy are in front of his glory. So we are looking at this concept, meditating on the idea of God surrounded and lifted up by all of the majesty of creation, the things beyond even what we can see. And yet, what is God's throne? It is glory, but it is also mercy. It is also compassion. It is also loving kindness. So it's not just God having a power trip. It's not God just being, and the rest of us are worms. We are, but the emphasis is not on our insignificance and God's distance. It's actually on God's caring about the world through the vehicles of creation and connection. Onward. Tovim me'orot shebara Eloheinu. And now we're getting into the physical forms that we're using as our meditative focus. Good are the lamps, the lights, which God created. We're talking about the ones in the sky, sun, moon, stars. Yitzaram beda'at bevina ufaskel. And boy, do we know that now. They were made with knowledge and with understanding and with skill. The universe hangs together incredibly well. Koach ugvura natan bahem. Power and strength he gave to them, meaning to these celestial bodies. Liot moshlim bekerev tevel. To be rulers near the earth. All right, so here is another mystical element that can get confusing, but what it's trying to say is that these heavenly bodies serve as a conduit of God's will. Now, that doesn't have to be taken as a intermediary, as many other prayers point out, we don't have intermediaries between us and God. And when we focus too much on the concept of intermediaries, we get into possible idolatrous idea. That's why we don't pray to our dead to act on our behalf, for example, and we're not supposed to pray to angels to act on our behalf, although some people have picked up those habits. Instead, what we are saying is that when we look around the world is governed by these heavenly bodies. Look at the sun. Our existence is governed by our relationship to the sun. As we live here in Central Florida, we know the sun is kind of key to all of our weather, and with that weather, everything else around us. Too much sun, too much heat, boom, more hurricanes. Not enough sun, too cold, and now we're not getting the other things we need to keep life going. It's got to be in balance. And the moon and the stars as well. The moon, of course, with tides, but also just as a cycle of the seasons and reminder of our months. All of this are integral to how our world works. Yes.
Yeah. When was this written?
So Eladon is very old. It's about 1,000 years old. Let me just double check. Yes. Yes, it's about 1,000 years old.
Okay, and I see that the premise is that science is not void.
Yeah, science is not the enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, science is not the opposite of religion or faith. The idea that the world is made with wisdom, with skill and understanding, is perfectly compatible with Jewish belief, but also it is saying, but don't think science is telling you what everything means. It can tell you how to launch a rocket into space, but it doesn't tell you what life is about. And in fact, it usually will take something non-scientific before you want to launch a rocket into space. There's a whole lot else that goes into that, that process that cannot be simply answered with an equation. Let's go ahead and we're going to read the second page, and then we're going to come back and sing the whole thing because it is kind of one melodic unit. Meleim ziv umfikim nora, filled with shine and imbued with rays. Na'e zivam bechol ha'olam, they lovely or in a lovely manner, they shine throughout the world. So this is, again, we're talking about the heavenly bodies. Amazing, but Satan, besasim bevolam, happy in their rising and joyous in their setting. They're literally, they're going and coming because of their trips around the world from our perspective. Osim be'ema retzon kona, doing with awe or reverence the will of their creator. So here again, we are defanging the idea that these are independent entities. The sun is not a god. The sun is not an angel with personal will or volition. Instead, the sun is a tool of God, and it is happy to go along with whatever God needs of it. Of course, this is also a hint to us that we too, in our place in creation, should be trying to do God's will in the same way, happy and with awe. We just don't do that very well so often. Pe'er v'chavod notin lishmo, wonder and glory they give to his name. We are more impressed by God when we contemplate the universe. Excuse me. Sohola verina lezecher malchuto, joy and celebration in recall of his kingship. Hara lashemesh vayizrachor, he called out to the sun, and it shone with light. Ra'a v'hitkin surat halvana, he saw and fixed the shape of the moon. Again, these are not independent deities. These are things that God has crafted for us. Shevach notnin lo, they give him praise. Kol tziva maro, all the heavenly hosts. And usually when we get to tzva or tzvaot, we're talking about the stars. Tiferet ugedula, wonder and grandeur. Seraphim, ve'ofanim, ve'chayot hakodesh. And there are our three angelic creatures. The seraphs, like seraphim. The ophanim is another type of angelic entity. And chayot hakodesh, a third category. Okay, so shall we sing? Of course we will. That's why we're going to do this. Let me see if I can find my right key to start. El Adon al kol hamachi, Baruch umborach befi kol neshama, Godlo v'tuvo ma'alei olam, Dat u'tbuna sovevim oto, המתגאה חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה, זכות ומשול לפני כיסו, חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו. טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו, יצרם בדעת, בבינה ובהשכל. כוח וגבורה נתן בהם, להיות מושלים בקרב תבל. מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה, נהגים בכל העולם. שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם, עושים בימה רצון קונם. ער וכבוד נותנים לשמו, סולה ורינה לזכר מלכותו. הר לשמש ויזרחו, רב הקים צורר הלבנה. שבח נותנים לו, כל צבא מרום. תפארת וגדולה, סרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש. And technically we're moving on immediately into the next sentence, but that is where the melody for this poem finishes. Yes.
So why is the every other stanza
Do,
doing
do, do, because it's nice. There is no liturgical reason for doing that. It just helps it be a little bit more varied.
But in respect to the ending of each paragraph, the first goes up.
Yeah. It's because it's nice to have some variety in the melody. There's really no there's no deeper reason other than it works well. If you wanted to do for the end of every stanza, go for it. It's going to be hard to fit on the last stanza because of the way it trails off, but there's nothing wrong with doing it. And if you didn't want to do the you just wanted to finish it with that's also perfectly fine. We're not fulfilling a particular rabbinic requirement or mystical teaching. It is a beautiful song. And like I said, there are other melodies, but that's the one. Oops, I just realized my camera was cutting off my head, but that's the one we're going to do for today. Otherwise, we could spend all night singing, which wouldn't be a terrible thing, but it wouldn't be as productive. Okay, we move on to page 152. And as I mentioned, the end of Eladon is talking about those Seraphim, the Ophanim, the Hayot HaKodesh, those angelic creatures that are doing what? Well, they are praising to God, right? So this literally is carrying on from where we just left off. It is an incomplete sentence at the bottom of page 151. Page 152 comes to finish it off. So, La'el asher shavat mikol ha'ma'asim. And who are they praising? What was the object of their veneration? God, who ceased from all the deeds. So Eladon begins the concept of God's amazing creation. And now we are talking about the one that shavat, that ceased from all the creations. And if you're hearing a little connection there, shavat, that is indeed the root word of the Hebrew for Shabbat, for the day of cessation. And this is our Shabbat, Yotzer Or. So we are going to squeeze in Shabbat as part of our celebration of God's creation. Now that goes counter to a lot of people's ideas about creation, because if you ask people, how many days did it take for God to make the world, they'll say, oh, there were 6 days. No, there were 6 days to make the physical world. And then by ceasing on Shabbat, that 7th day is part of creation, and indeed is telling us about a deeper truth to creation other than just the physicality of the world. So Eladon is great. We're looking at all the amazing things God made, and then we stop and say, that's the most amazing thing God made. He didn't make. He made by not making. He made by stopping. And that is the gift of Shabbat. So we're going to go ahead and go through the translation, but the parts that are bolded are the parts that are traditionally chanted to the Nusach. Again, you'll see that the words don't line up quite as well on this page because I was trying to fit them all on the slide. So, La'el asher shavat, already read that one. Bayom hashvi'i, on the 7th day, Nit'ala ve'yashav al kisei kvodo, and he elevated himself, he rose up and sat upon the throne in his honor. Tiferet ata leyom menucha oneg v'kara leyom hashabbat. And with glory, he enwrapped for the day of rest a delight, and he called it Shabbat. We're over there. So what this is saying is that he finished creation. And when God finished creation, you can imagine him ascending up to the throne, dusting off his hands from the 6 days of work. But he is creating in that absence of labor, in the absence of creation, this time of Shabbat, which is an even greater glory because it is this moment of rest and, of course, a moment of delight, of oneg, which is one of the terms used for Shabbat throughout Judaism. Yeh shevach shel yom hashvi'i shebo shavat el mikol malachto. This is the praise of that seventh day, because on it, El, God, right, the Almighty, ceased from all his labor. So the seventh day resonates with a certain praise of God that is different than the 6 days of creation. They sing God's praise through what was made. This is singing God's praise from what he stopped from. And then it's going to say, V'yom hashvi'i mishabeach ve'omer. So that seventh day, Shabbat, will actually offer a praise and say, so we are personifying the day as though it had a mouth, and it is going to utter a praise. That sounds a little far-fetched. We've never heard of a day talk, but haven't we? Mizmor shir leyom hashabbat, tov lehodot ladonai. Right, so that is a quote taken from Psalm 92, the Psalm for Shabbat. And in context, what it is saying, or what it's doing with this song, is it's saying that this is a song by the Sabbath day, as though Shabbat itself composed this song, as though Shabbat itself is singing this song. By its very existence, it is telling us something about God. And so Shabbat has its own song. And then again, we carry on, Lafichach yevaru v'irachu la'el kol yitzurav. And therefore, because of everything we've just discussed, glorify and bless God, all of his creations. So come on, guys, we should all be on the same page here. Shevach yikar v'tlag nu la'el melech yotzer kol hamanachil menucha le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato b'yom Shabbat kodesh. Right, so that everyone should give this praise, this esteem, this expression of God's greatness, and give honor to the King of all, the King that is the creator of all, and that he is the one that apportions out allots, I think is the word I use, rest to his people Israel in his holiness on this day this holy day of Shabbat. So one of the things that God did that was special was that not only did he create Shabbat by stopping creation, he also made Shabbat special for us as a special gift that he granted to the Jewish people, which is why Shabbat has such a special place in our heart. Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Yitkadash V'Yischar Malkeinu Yitpa'ar B'Shamayim Mima'al Ve'al Ha'aretz Mitachat. So therefore, what did I do? That was Shimra. Right. So therefore, your name Adonai, our God, will be sanctified and will be your sovereignty will be remembered, our King, and you will be glorified in the heavens above and on the earth underneath, the earth below. So, let's finish off our last lines before we do the chanting. Tiparach Moshienu al Shevach Ma'aseh Yadecha. So you will be blessed, our Savior, above or by the work, the praise of the working of your hands, the creation of your hands, and the Al Me'orei Or She'asita Yeparucha Sela, bringing it back to the theme of what we began with, and for the lights which you made, which glorify you forever. Sela. Okay, now let's go back to our melody talk. So remember way back when we began with Shochen ha da 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 da. At the moment, we're still in that mode. So that is the melody that we are still using, even this late into Yotzer Or. Now, on the next page, we are going to switch, and that can often trip people up, making that melody switch. But for now, we're still doing it. So, for example, at the top of this page, this paragraph will begin, Lahel asher shavat mikol hamasim, and then we do this privately in the language of your choice. And then we'll pick up singing at the bottom, whoever is leading. Tiparach Moshienu al shevach maseh yadecha ve'al meyoreho she'asita yeparu chasela. So that gets us ready to go on to the next page, page 153, which is all one page. I had to divide it for the slides, but this will still be Yotzer Or until we get to the bottom of the page. I know, it's a long lesson. And we're going to keep on that same melody. Yiparach Tzurenu Malkeinu Vegoaleinu. But that is the last time we're going to hear that melody. And if that's the farewell, now we got to transition over into the core of the Shacharit melody, rather than the preliminary melody that we began with last week. But we still need to do a little translation. Be blessed, our former, the one that shaped us, our king, our redeemer, Borei Kedoshim, creator of all the holy beings, Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu. Praise be your name forever, our king, Yotzer Meshakav, the one who forms the ministering angels. It's another category. The Asher Meshatav, and with these ministering angels, Kulam Omdim Barum Olam. They will stand at the height of the universe. Umashmi'im Bira Yachad, and they will say together or cause to be heard, they'll declare in unison, Bekol Divrei Elohim, the words of the voice of the voice, or they will voice the words of God. Elohim, Hayim, God, the living God, Umelech Olam, the king of the world, or the king of the universe. And then we are going to pick up and do the rest of this page out loud, and to a slightly different melody than we began with. But let's translate first. Kulam ahuvim, we're still talking about them. We're down here in the translation line. All of them are beloved. Kulam birudim, and all of them are pure. Kulam giborim, and all of them are mighty. Again, we're talking about this host that represents all of the forces that are on God's side. Well, everything is on God's side, but in particular, these are the forces of creation. V'chulam osim be'ema uvira v'tzon koneh. That is different than our tradition. Konam is our tradition. Yeah, konam. So again, I pulled the text from a different Siddur because it was already pre-formatted and I hate typing. So unfortunately, I did not catch the Ashkenazic change there.
Which Siddur did you pull that from?
I'd have to go back and look. It's a digital copy that I have. I don't remember what the original was, but for most of it, it is standard for most Ashkenazim. But I missed that particular. It means the same thing. Konehem and Konam are the same. Are two ways of saying the same thing, which is essentially their maker or their creator. So all of them will do the will of God in awe and with reverence, I guess is the best way to put Ema Uvira. V'chulam porchim epihem, and all of them will open up their mouths, Kedusha u'tohora, in holiness and in purity, B'shira u'v'zimra, and with song and with music, Umvarchim, Shavchim, Umfarim, Umaritzim, Umakdishim, Umamlechim. Right, we get a whole series of verbs that are what they are doing. Again, we are being overloaded with this imagery of an entire chorus that is singing, because that chorus is, of course, the universe. So a version of the translation here, they will bless and they will praise and they will glorify, they will revere, they will sanctify, and they will proclaim the sovereignty. They will enthrone or coronate et Shem Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol HaGibor VaHanorah Kadoshu. The name of God, the King, the great, the mighty, the awesome, the Holy One is He. So, how does this melody go? Because we're going to sing it from our Kulam. That's the wrong. There's my Kulam. Kulam ahovim, Kulam virurim, Kulam giborim, Kulam otim be'ema uviraretzon konam. וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה וטהרה, בשירה ובזמרה, ומברכים ומשבחים ופארים ומעריצים, ומקדישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, Kadosh Hu. And then we're going to continue on the next page. But that is our new melody set. Bum bum ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum ba 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 bum bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum 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 bum. You mix those up and continue them as long as you get the ending right and the opening right. It is up to you and your own improvisational skills to make it live each time you dub. All right, pressing on. Sorry, I forgot to translate our footnotes up there. We have Ezekiel 3:12 and we have Isaiah 6:3. These are parts of the that we have. The Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh comes from Isaiah, and the Baruch Kavod comes from Ezekiel. So if you want to look those up, those are your citations. All right, so we continue. V'chulam mikablim alehem, and all of them accept upon themselves the yoke of the divine, which again, you can see the Hebrew is a lot shorter than the English. All malchut shamayim zeh mizeh. They accept the yoke of heaven from each other. V'nonim rashut zeh lazeh, and they give leave or permission to one another. Lehakdish leyotzam benachat ruach, to sanctify their former, the one that made them, with clear speech and with pleasantness. Kedusha kulam ke'echad onin ve'omrin b'yira. With holiness, all of them will answer and say with awe. And we're going to pause there. So let me just do a little bit of what's going on here. This idea of accepting the yoke of Shamayim, the yoke of heaven, means that you are willing, you accept to do God's will. And it's something that humans do as well. And of course, this prayer is not telling us just what angels do, it's telling us what we ought to be doing, but what we often ignore. And this notion of the Nim Rashut, they give permission to each other, Zeh lazeh, is trying to say, we know that it is audacious, that even angels, it seems a bit chutzpah for them to think they are even worthy to sing God's praises. But they are, and that means we are as well. That we are not wrong for thinking that we can have a connection to God, that we are able to sing in praise of God. From even our limited ability to understand the greatness of God, we are still okay. We can give each other permission to have the audacity to actually pray. And so that's what's going on there. And then, of course, we quote from Isaiah, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivaot. Melochol haaretz kivodo. Holy, holy, holy is Adonai of hosts. The whole world is filled with his glory. And then let's go ahead and finish off the page so we can sing it. V'ha'ofanim v'chayot hakodesh. We're back to our angel categories, the ofanim and the holy creatures. Ra'ash gadol, with a great tumult, a great sound. Nitnasim li'umat seraphim. Le'umatam meshabchim ve'omrim, and they are then opposite the seraphim, the seraphs, and then they are facing them. They are sort of opposing, but not in like enemy opposing, but like I am opposing Bernie right now. We are opposite each other in this room, and then they praise and they say, Baruch kevod Adonai min komo. Blessed is the glory of God from its place. All right, and this is continuing in that melody that we began practicing on the previous slide. V'chulam mekablim alehem, ol malchut shamayim zeh mizeh, v'notnim rashut zeh lazeh, lakdish reyotzam benachat ruach, v'safa v'ruach minima kedosha, kulam ke'echad onim, ve'omrim b'yirah. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivaot, Melochol haaretz kivodo. V'ha'ofanim v'chayot hakodesh, v'rahash gadol, mitnasim liumat seraphim, לעומת המשבחים, ואומרים, ברוך כבוד אדוני, ממקומו. And then we're going to trail off in the next paragraph. Now, when we do this collectively, it's fine for the congregation to sing this all together. It's also fine, and you may find in some communities where the congregation will just join in with the Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh and the Baruch Kavod paragraphs. That may be all that the particular people in that room know. And that's fine as being part of it. And you'll notice that we are now imitating the angelic host, that we have a call and response. We are joining together. We are giving each other permission, no matter how bad you think your voice is, to sing and praise God. Because trust me, next to God's infinity, our infinitude, no one's voice, no matter how great it is any better than the rest of our voices that are not as great. So if we recognize truly our relationship to God, none of us should ever be embarrassed to sing in front of God, or either all of us should be embarrassed or none of us should be embarrassed. Don't think that you have to be a great singer in order to participate in this. No one is a great singer when it's compared to God. All right, everybody with me so far? Good. We're going to finish up Yotzer Or. We're still pushing through Yotzer Or, folks. It's a long blessing. The other ones are much shorter. So we finish off in that same melody. Lel Baruch Nimot Yiteinu. To the blessed God, they give sweet melody. And in many communities, we do this privately. Lamelech Chai V'Kayam Zmirot Yomeru. To God, the King, living and enduring songs they say. V'tushbachot Yashmiu, and praises they proclaim. Hihu Levado. Poel Givurot, Oseh Parashot, Baal Milchamot. For he alone does deeds of greatness. He makes things that are new, and he masters war. Zorea Tzedakot, Matzmiach Yeshuot, Borei Refuot. He sows like sowing seeds of righteousness. He causes salvation to blossom or flower, and he creates healing. Nora Kehilot Adon Haniflaot. He is awesome in praises, meaning he's recipient of praises, and that shows his awesomeness. He is the master of wonders. HaMechadesh v'tuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit, and he renews his goodness every day, always in the act of creation. Ha'amor, how do we know this? Well, it is written or said, this time from the Psalms 135, Le'ose orim gedolim, hi le'olam chasto. And as it is said, the maker of great lights, because his chasdo is eternal. Now, chesed is a word that often gets translated as loving kindness, but chesed is one of those words that has had different meanings at different points in Jewish history, and sometimes there's overlap, and you have to try and figure out what the meaning is. In this part of the psalm, and as used here in this prayer, we're not talking about God's loving kindness. We're talking about God's fidelity, God's faithfulness, God's reliability. It's a big concept in Judaism, as we're going to see in other prayers that we get through, that God is somebody you can count on. And so chesed here is being used more in that faithfulness, that we can rely on God. I can rely that tomorrow the sun's going to rise. And I can rely on that because I can rely on God. That's what gives me that confidence. So that is where we're going with chesed in this particular context. The idea of chesed being loving kindness came later, actually, in the Hebrew language history, because if you were faithful and loyal to someone, you acted with loving kindness towards them. That was implied, if you will, by being faithful to someone, being good to your word, by being there for them when they needed them. Well, yeah, that's called loving kindness. Then we get one more expression of hope, which was controversial. There are very early Sidurim from 1,000 years ago that debate whether this next line should even be included because it sounds too petitionary, because it is, and it's deviating from the overall theme, which is just celebrating creation. So let's see what it says. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir, shine a new light on Zion or for Zion, v'nizkeh hulanu mehira le'oro, and may we be worthy or merit to be within its light. And then Baruch Atah Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot. Why is that last line, the ask for a new light, problematic? Well, one, we try to minimize our petitions on Shabbat to only the absolute essentials, such as healing or for peace. But this is saying, hey, God, we want redemption, which is what the metaphor is trying to say. So could you speed it up? And that was felt by some other sages in the past to be a little stepping over the line of petition, stepping over the line of, look, on Shabbat, we're celebrating what was done. We're not asking for more. And especially in Yotzer Or, where it's about creation, it's not about more. I mean, maybe this would have been fine in Gaal Yisrael, the prayer about redemption. But even there, we're celebrating redemption. We're not requesting redemption. And so it was debated. However, the Jewish population won. So it is now found in almost every version because you know what? Oftentimes what people want to say is what ends up in the Siddur more than what a few rabbis say is only the right thing to say. Because the prayers represent all of us, not only a singular opinion. All right, let's go ahead and see how we would finish this off in terms of chanting. Or chadash al Tzion tahir, v'nizkeh kulanu mehera le'oro, baruch ata Adonai, Yotzer HaMe'orot. Get used to that type of closing, because that's what we're going to use for closing up the other blessings as well. All right. We now move on to Ahava Rabbah, and this is going to be on page 154 of the Lev Shalem, and Ahava Rabbah is the parallel to Ahavat Olam. Just as Yotzer Or matches Ma'ariv Aravim in the evening, Ahava Rabbah matches Ahavat Olam. They are both about revelation. They are both about God's gift of Torah, and they are both heavily focused on that word Ahava, on love. That God's gift of revelation was a loving gift. It wasn't that God just wanted to push us around by giving us commandments. It was God helping us to navigate this overwhelming world. I mean, we've just gone through page after page of the world is far greater and more complex than we can even begin to imagine. Torah helps us actually feel like maybe we can do okay in this world. And so we will see that at the end, this is all about coming together through Torah. This is giving us that, that stability. And we're going to get into how that looks in practice. Now, in our community, we do tend to sing all of Ahava Rabbah. Some communities only begin with V'ha'er Einenu, but we will do the TI standard once we get through the translation. Ahava Rabbah Ahavtanu Adonai Eloheinu. With unbounded or great or limitless love, you have loved us, Adonai, our God. Hemla Gedolah, with abundant pity, Vitera Hamalta Aleinu, you have shown pity upon us. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Get used to that as we're still in Elul, heading towards high holidays. Ba'avur Avotenu, for the sake of our ancestors, Shebatchu Vecha, who trusted in you, Vatladem Chukei Chayim, that you taught them laws of life. Hein Techonenu Utlamdenu. Thus also, please be gracious to us and teach us. So we're saying, look, God, you've loved us. And we know that because you gave Torah. And also, you know, kind of, could you keep it going for the sake of our ancestors? They trusted in you, and you taught them and gave them these laws. That's revelation. And we would like that graciousness, and we would like that instruction now as well. And then we continue. Avinu Av Harachaman, our Father, merciful Father, Hamrachem Rachem Aleinu. Again, we're really hitting that the Rechem idea here of compassion, mercy, right? The one who is merciful, be merciful and show mercy, or give mercy, or mercifully mercify us. I mean, it doesn't work in English, I'm afraid. Aleinu, upon us, v'tein belibein. And what would that mercy generate in us? It would give us a heart, lahavin, l'haskil, lishmoa, lilmo, lamed, lishmor, la'asot, l'kayem. Right? We get into our infinitive chain because that's part of Hebrew poetry. You give us a heart that will comprehend, and I used comprehend twice, didn't I? That will comprehend and that will understand and that will hearken to, that will listen in a way that gives us compliance, that will learn and that will teach. Now we move from being what happens to us to what we do for others, and we will guard, meaning we will continue to actually keep the rules, and we will fulfill them, and we will make sure that they are done. Et kol divrei Talmud Toratecha be'ahava, all the words of teaching that are in your Torah with love. Yes.
I think I figured it out. It's when they put the bet in front of the word heart, but it's to put in the heart.
Exactly. V'tem belibeinu, and put in our heart, or put through our heart, or give unto our heart the capacity to understand, comprehend, and do, and teach, and all of these other things, right? Because remember, heart in biblical poetry doesn't just mean your emotions, right? Heart in biblical poetry means the totality of you. What in modern times we would probably call your heart and mind, meaning intellectual and emotion. The ancients did not understand those to be two categories. And they were right about that. Modern psychology is just beginning to come around to that idea that we don't have a separate intellectual capacity and a separate emotional capacity, that these are part of the same whole person. And the representative organ for the whole person in the biblical poetry is the heart. So when we say give to our heart to understand, that makes perfect sense in Torah, and in our tefillah, in our prayers. If you were to say that in modern English, it sounds a little weird. You say, give my mind the ability to understand, my heart the ability to care. We cut them into two pieces and act like they're separate. No, it's all one thing, and that's one of those great gifts you get when looking at the actual translation. Okay, onward, because I definitely want to finish this tonight, because we're not going to get as far as I thought, but that's okay, because we're learning and talking about it more than expected. But I'm never going to complain about more learning, especially not while doing this prayer. V'ha'er einenu. Actually, hold on a second. You know what? Before we press on, let's do the song part of this, because it's a different melody than here. We actually get 3 different melodies, at least for the Temple Israel standard Ahava Rabbah. So let's break it up so that the melodies are easier to see. So let's go back to our top. Ahava Rabbah Haftanu Adonai Eloheinu Emla Gedola V'Tera Hamalta Aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Ba'avur Avotenu Shebatfu Becha Avinu Malkeinu Vatelamdem Chukechayim Hein Techonenu Tlamdenu Avinu Ha'avarahaman Amrachem Rachem Aleinu V'ten Belibeinu Lehavinu L'haskir Lishmoa Lilmod U'lilamed Lishmor Ve'lasko Ulkayim Ekol Divrei Talmud Toratecha Be'ahava. And then we're going to start the next paragraph after we translate. I know I can see, Bernie, you want to keep going, but let's translate first. V'ha'er einenu b'toratecha, and enlighten our eyes with your Torah. V'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha, and attach our hearts, cause our hearts, glue our hearts, even in modern Hebrew, a good way of putting it, to your commandments. So it's one of those great English words, cleave, that means itself and the opposite of itself, because you can cleave to something. You can also cleave something in half, cut it apart or attach. English is weird. Dabek just means to come together. So to your commandments, V'yached levavenu li'ahava u'l'yira et shemecha, and unify, bring together as one. Again, that v'yachad, anytime you see that unify or oneness or togetherness, it's always going to be off that root achad, meaning one, which is very prophetic, because we're going to go into the Shema, declaring God's oneness right after this prayer. So unify our hearts to love you and to revere you or be in awe of you, of your name. V'lo nevosh leolam va'ed, and do not allow us to be put to shame ever. Ki v'shem kodshecha hagadol v'hanora batachnu, because of the fact that we trust, that we are on your relying upon your name, which is holy and great and awesome. Nagila v'nispecha b'shuatecha, and we will rejoice and we will exult or be happy in your salvation, meaning when you save us, save the world. So we're basically in the middle here saying, look, we are being loyal to your Torah. Don't let that put us to shame, right? This loyalty should not come with the high price of hate and persecution. It unfortunately often has, but we still believe that there will be a final redemption for us and the world. And Torah is the vehicle for making that happen. We're not going to get there by giving up on Torah. We'll get there by making sure Torah has a bigger part in the world. The usual melody is והננו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא פתחנו נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. Okay, at this point, it is customary in many, many communities to take the tzitzit from the four corners of the talit and to gather them together and to wrap them up. Many people will wrap them around their finger. You can just hold them. There aren't actual rules, just customs regarding this. Now, why are we doing that? Well, because we are symbolically representing the meaning of this first line. V'havi'enu l'shalom me'arba kanfot ha'aretz, and bring us in peace or peacefully from the four corners of the world. So we're using the four corners of the talit as a map, a representation of the four corners of the world. But of course, by pulling them together with the tzitzit, we are saying that it's the tzitzit that bring us together, not just as Jews, but bring the world together. The tzitzit represent the mitzvot, the commandments that are there to help the world be what it should be. And what will that look like? B'tolifenu umimiyut le'artzenu, based off the biblical phrase, and you will guide us there, you will lead us there upright to our land. Why do we know that's going to happen? Ki el poel yeshuot ata, because we understand, we know that you are God, the Almighty, you are the one who performs deliverance. Uvanu v'charta, and you have chosen us, mikol from all the nations, vilashon, and from every language or tongue, v'keraftanu l'shimcha hagadol sela be'emet, and you have brought us close to your great name, forever in truth, and that was through this gift that we have been celebrating in Ahava Rabbah, through the gift of Torah. Did God do this? What is our purpose? Lehodot lecha ulyachedcha be'ahava, to give thanks to you, but most importantly, ulyachedcha, we will make you one. We will proclaim your unity, your oneness with love, which of course is our lead-in to the Shema and the Ve'ahavta, where we remind ourselves of God's oneness and of the command to love God with all of our heart. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Blessed are you, Adonai, the one that has chosen his people Israel with love. Now, this can be just chanted. And you can just go through the entire paragraph like that. Nothing wrong with that. Perfectly fine. However, in Temple Israel and many other congregations, it has been customary to use a slightly modified version of Hatikva as a melody for this final paragraph. And of course, that has marked symbolism, because by using Hatikva, we are saying that we are being brought back to our land, Le'artzenu, that we are going back to the land of Israel, and that we should recognize that as much as we plead for God, please restore us, please save us, we have a glimpse of what salvation looks like in the modern establishment of the state of Israel. So by having that melody, we're sort of saying, thank you for the version we've already got. We know the job's not done, because obviously there's still a lot of strife, but we are closer to redemption now than we have been in almost 2,000 years. And that's worthy of acknowledgement, even as we ask for more. So by putting in Hatikva, it's a nice sort of juxtaposition of hope and as well as gratitude. So when you use this version, it sounds like this. Sorry, let me point out. Va havienu. This is one of those little grammar things in Hebrew that can drive you nuts if you know it and someone else doesn't. Because we are coming before this vowel, it doesn't say vi havienu in the usual form of the conjunctive vav of using vav as an and. Instead, it's va havienu. That is considered the proper pronunciation. So when you sing this, va havienu, please. Right? Don't do the fingernails on the chalkboard for the rabbi.
So there's no vav before that.
There's no va before a vet. No, it's the vowel underneath it, the underneath that hey that's causing the transformation. In front of a vet, in fact, it turns into u. But that's usually much clearer for people to notice, and most people don't make that mistake when they're reading from pointed text. If they're reading from unpointed text, then yes, it can creep in. V'havihenu leshalom me'arba kanpot haaretz v'tolifenu omemihut le'atzenu ki el poel yeshuotata ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת, להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. Let me go back to the regular. Baruch atah Adonai, but then we make a modification. Abocher v'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Shema gets us ready for that Shema key, and so there is this changeover in the normal way we would conclude a bracha. I should point out that it is in most Ashkenazic customs still correct to answer Amen to this blessing. There are a few, especially in the Hasidic world, that try not to say Amen. Most other authorities would think that was incorrect because while they're trying to spiritually link this to the Shema, which I understand, we have just finished a blessing, which means it deserves the answer of Amen from the congregation. So it should be Amen. Shema. And then we're on to the Shema, which we will deal in greater detail next week. We're not going to go through all of it because we did that when we did Mariv, but I will point out the melody change at the end. I will also point out the role that those tzitzit that are wrapped up in your hand are going to play during its recitation in the third paragraph of the Shema. But that's all for next week. Thank you all to our Zoom friends and everyone else, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your evening, and hope to see you all soon in person as well. Oh, did I miss a chat? I missed a chat. Hopefully it wasn't. Okay, I was just saying good night. That's fine. Good. It's the problem with